we're going to open up this Excel document, and what we're going to do is look at these under the umbrella of our school codes. So we have a lot of SEEB codes here, and we'll just do this as our organizations, and we'll just copy all of these SEEB codes. There will be some duplicates, so we'll go over to data. We're going to remove those duplicates so that we get a clean record. Yeah, we have 860. Yeah, this is a very nicely put together test data set in the clean slate. Way to go, Technolutions. Love it. And maybe we just do 2 header rows here. And these are going to be volume. And prospect, inquiry, app, admit, enrolled. So some basic Excel formulas are just helpful, I find, when you're doing data analysis. You don't always have as much flexibility in Slate. So we're just going to count ifs. So we're going to count. You can also do a sum if, since I have these as ones. So we're just going to count if that column data is a 1. Now we're also going to assign this specifically. Maybe we just do a couple of contextual rows up here. So this is going to be essentially your total, and maybe this is blanks. So we can copy this formula, and we're going to add another criteria here. And we want to know specifically how many prospects when the school code equals this. And a fun trick, just double click that little green box in the bottom right hand of your cell. That will drag the formula down. It sometimes gets a little stuck sometimes, so you don't necessarily always want to trust that it works. And because this is, we just want to see what blinks, it looks like we had a lot of blinks. So instead of a dynamic reference to the cell, we're just going to have a couple quotation marks. So the vast majority of our student records don't have school 1 codes or SEEB codes and their first school on their school data table. But we do have a lot of data here. So now we can pull this. Because the columns are also going to move over, we want to make sure that we're anchoring our references. So we always want to be referencing column B when we're looking at our SEEB codes. Similarly, we want to do like a window F4 that anchors with the $signs our school code column. And we do genuinely want to pull over the others though. So you can see this is looking for column B, so that SEEB code still matches, and it's looking for exports in column G, which is our enrolling. So we're getting counts across each of our organizations of how many prospects, how many inquiries, how many apps, how many admitted students, and how many enrolling students are at each of these schools. And we can also just bring this up if we want. And just make sure we're getting our baselines here. Find and replace might have actually been faster, but here we are. So we do have live data across all 5 of our statuses. So we have our volume, and we also want to maybe look at what is the average engagement. So we're going to do an average ifs. So we're going to average our person engagement score. And again, we want to reference this SEEB code. So we'll just click the B in that column. Comma allows you to just separate each of these data import endpoints. And let's do this at each of these prospect levels as well. Let's see if this is actually a problem with my formula. It might be. Oh no, I mean, I'm just dividing by 0 because there probably just isn't engagement. Oh, there's some engagement score in there for my test data. So we're going to lock down our engagement score column. We're going to lock down our... that was probably the problem there. We're going to lock down that seed code reference to just the column, not the row. And we'll leave that as something that I can pull over. And let's just create a filter. Okay, that's working. That's just a lot of dividing by 0, so like my formulas are going to error out. So I just added that if error. So if the result is an error, then just give me a placeholder text. And I can just look at each of these columns. And this is a not very robust data set on the engagement scoring, but I do see some engagement scores here. So on average, the school has, the prospects at the school have an average engagement score of 60. So then we can start looking at, you could look at enrollment likelihood, but I also just want to look at actual conversion rates. And you're going to get some of this just with like the volume, but I want to look more specifically, because I think it's a good data point to have. What are your prospect to inquiry conversion rates, inquiry to app, app to accept, accept to enroll? And I think those are standalone data points that can be very valuable in understanding. It also helps us with the persona pieces in a little bit as well, as you seeing either low volume, high conversion means you need to do what you can to increase your applicant pool or increase your prospect pool at that school, because they do convert very highly. And what we really start looking at is, let's just put this together. So and I can make this header a little bit larger, so we can actually see what we're doing. App to admit, and then just admit to enroll. And you could also do like a gross enroll, and you do like matriculation, but we're just going to look at those different conversion points. And again, we'll just do an if error, and we're going to divide our inquiries by our prospects. And it would help if I actually give if I gave a fallback value to that. So we can see 50%, but it's 50% of a very low volume and 80% of a higher volume. So we're starting to see how these different data points are able to offer context, but they're all puzzle pieces into the broader quorum image. And perhaps you wanted to weight conversion higher than volume or volume higher than conversion. We're going to do that in a minute, because we're going to start actually building out, I think the kind of what I have found to be like a good balance of simple but effective is looking at your prospect pool at these quorum levels and identifying your quintiles. So what's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth quintiles of volumes and conversion rates, engagement metrics. So we're just going to do quintiles, volume, and we're just going to do quintile conversion. And we don't need these extra columns. So, but we do need some personas. And maybe we're just going to do, and I guess we could have we don't have enough engagement volume to do quintiles off of engagement, so we'll skip that for now. especially for just time, because I think we are already 25 minutes into this. I think I started around 3:15 Pacific. So we'll just do our personas starting here. Maybe we do like a high volume, low, just low yield. Maybe that's our focus, is specific elements of our conversion. And maybe we want to do high volume. Let's do low volume. I think that's more interesting to identify those. And then high conversion. We'll just do full conversion. If I could actually type, literally, if I could type anything at all while doing a live video, and even not live video, terrible typer. So yeah, those are just going to be the two of those kind of personas that we're going to look at the moment. So let's build out. Don't necessarily want filters working on this. And we're going to have to first identify what the quintiles are. Then we can write formulas that allow us to apply. And there's probably a much better way to apply a quintile than what this formula is. I just haven't taken the time to figure it out. So prospect, inquiry, app, admit, enroll, and then convert. We're going to skip. I'm going to skip engagement for now, just because it's such a small subsection of the test records that have it. And I'll just copy these from over here. You can also just do a dynamic reference as well. So you could just like, oh, I just want this to be exactly. So if I do rename those cells, these cells will be renamed as well. And I would recommend like adding some color coding up here just to visually not make this as wild to look at. So I've been doing quintiles for this, but you could do quartiles, you do deciles, do something much more granular. I think quintiles is a reasonable level of granularity for something that aggregates like it does. But again, if you do this and you realize, hey, this has not been a best practice at our institution, please let me know. Drop me a comment. I'd love to improve this process. This is very much so, after having that conversation with Eric, has very much so been a vacuum chamber that I've built this in. So again, trying to strike that balance of relatively quick and easy, large quotation marks around that, to spin up, while being nuanced enough and detailed enough to produce a really valuable score at the end of it. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can do with quorum scoring beyond just travel planning. We are running out of time, so I needed to maybe not pontificate so quite so much and just get to work here. So we're going to look at percentile include. And let's just pop over here. And so we're just taking our group of prospects, like that volume count. And we are just going to pop back up here and get that percentile cutoff. So the kind of cutoff for that 20th percentile or first quartile is 4 prospects at the organization level. And we're just going to make sure that we anchor our rows. So when we do drag this formula down, we're not looking at like C6 to C866. But if you do update the data, just know that this formula is looking specifically at that range of data. And then let's also just anchor our quintile reference, or our percentile reference as well, because we're just going to be dragging this formula. So, and then our second quintile, or 40th percentile, is 5 prospects. So the larger prospect pool that you have, or inquiry pool, or applicant pool, admit pool, enrollment pool, gives you a better spread of these. So while you might want to score at these quintile levels, maybe it makes more sense to establish scoring bands that are a little bit off kilter from the quintiles to better get an idea and be able to score these in a meaningful ways. But this is, I think, a very reasonable first step here. Oh, yeah, I guess probably not really having... Oh, yeah, that is the average for our engagement score, which we're skipping. So our conversion rate, and again, this is just clean slate data, so it's just whatever they have in their system. So that first quintile conversion rate from prospect to inquiry is 67%. And let's see, the first quintile of the admit basically is just 25%. 80th percentile is 67%. So we're going to be able to start looking at these as our formula references to establish what quintile each of these are falling into. And I'm going to take a quick look at my formula real quick, just because it's a mess. There's 100% a better way to do it. I should have done that before. Again, if I were to rehearse this, I probably would have sat down and figured out a better formula for this. So basically a case when statement, if you're writing stuff in Slate formulas. So if C4, I said C5. So if C5 is less than and we're going to go ahead and lock that formula down. Then we're going to say less than or equals 2. Then we're just going to assign that quintile level. And we're just going to copy this a few times and just manually update these references. So if this is 4, then we're just going to call this 2. If this is 5, then it's the third quintile. And if that is 6, then we're just going to call that the fourth quintile. And if that is 7, we're going to call that the fifth quintile. And we're basically just giving them the number of points that... And each one of these needed an if statement behind it. And this is not going to be a percent. So we're just going to give that a number, take those decimal points off. Do that every single time. 20 years working in Excel. I do that every single time. So we're still looking at this very dynamically, so we can pull these formulas across. So if the number of admits, so this F5, we can see this in the formula, that's always our reference point, is less than or equal to, and then we're just passing this comparison through each of our quintiles. If it's equal to or less than any of these, then assign them the number of points of the quintile. So the better performing, quote unquote, what the organization is, or whatever umbrella data set you're using, the higher performing the school is, the more points based off of these quintiles that they're going to accrue. And we can continue to just pull this across. We do need, because these are if statements, the false is just going to pop up as none of these cases are true, which is a good error check. You could also just establish basically a null if, if null, just by adding another value there. just say that's 1. I should have done that to begin with. That's just a 1 quintile because they're not, or we could just do 0 so they get 0 points rather than getting that first quintile. I don't think we need to overly penalize students based off the contextual information though. So I think it's fine just giving them a point for, unless you need the granularity, then you implement this however you need to. I'm just pontificating as I rebuild this from scratch. So, but maybe we want to weight this quorum score higher based off of conversion. So maybe someone who gets 1 quintile in the prospect to inquiry conversion, it's like, oh, okay, maybe that is 1 point. But maybe we care more so about, and this will probably be a little bit easier to, maybe we care more about that yield. So maybe we take that quintile score and we multiply it by 3. So we're weighting that score a little bit heavier. Or maybe we're just manually like, oh, we only care about if they're in that 5th quintile, then maybe give them 15 points. But if they're in a lower quintile, we don't care. We can give them their normal quintile strength on that score. So you have an incredible amount of flexibility with how you weight each of these individual contributing variables to your quorum score. Whether that's at the individual quintile level, at the individual column level. Maybe if they're a high yield, we really want to put the thumb on the score. But maybe if it's a high inquiry to app, we just want to, all those quintiles, we're just going to double. So 2 quintile is 4 points, a 3rd quintile is 6 points, so on and so forth. And let's just add a column in here for a total. So like I said, we skipped our engagement piece, so we're just going to sum our quintiles here. And you can see Excel's like, hey, you have a different formula here, just make sure, because it's a different formula than what's to the left and then what's to the right. That's fine though, we purposely made that. So we have our total score here, but we want to look at specifically, start building personas. And we can add additional information, maybe if you have information on schools, whether it's out of state, in-state, STEM focused high school, whatever it could be. You have a lot of information at the student level that goes to the organizations and just maybe at the organization level. I recently had an interview with Sarah Kotlinski, who is doing a lot of, sounds like, I haven't seen the work yet, but she was talking about in that interview, doing a lot of really interesting contextual information at the organization level that I think would be wonderful. And when you're starting to look at organization or quorum personas, being able to have that context. And there's other vendor provided data, whether that's College Board with more or less vendor data coming from College Board every day. I'm not going to touch that though. ACS, that's already in Slate. And this is at the organization level, but it's also like asterisk at the organization level. But you could also be doing this kind of work at the zip code level, at the geomarket level. You can do it at all those levels simultaneously, and again, give it a much richer contextual information, filling out that ecospherical data that you have on students based off of just the context that you already have in your Slate records. So what we're going to start looking at is just with this quorum data though, we've built this up in, what has this been, 40 minutes now? We've spun this up. And so maybe we want to look at individual pieces here. So if, and we want to do multiple if statements. So if and, so we're saying high volume, maybe we just do an average then. So an average of our volume, and this is across prospect, inquiry, app, admit, enrolled, all of those quintiles. If that average is greater than or equal to, we're saying 4. And the actual yield itself is low, so we're just going to look at just yield. Maybe that's equal to or less than a 2. Then we're just going to say that we are matching that persona. And if not, just a 0. And I just need to add my parentheses to close off my and statement. So anytime in organization, we can already see that we're having it here. So the average quintile for the volume is greater than or equals to a 4. And the yields that admit to enroll conversion is less than or equal to a 2. So we're identifying this persona, which is a high volume, low yield. And we're looking also at low volume, high conversion. So we're essentially just going to flip this. So maybe we're looking at, maybe we're looking more specifically at just low prospect volume. We could maybe acquire more names, do more travel in these organizations, whatever the strategy is to increase the volume of the funnel for these schools or these target markets, zip codes, whatever the quorum is associated with. So if that's less than 2 and the average of the conversion, and maybe we just care about prospect inquiry conversion and inquiry to application version. Maybe if that is greater than or equal to 3 even, and then we're going to do that 1, 0.